Hello, everyone. Right now we're going to talk about carbohydrates. All right, so there are several different types of carbohydrates, and this slide shows an overview. On the left, we have simple carbs, like monosaccharides and disaccharides, which are made up of 1 and 2 molecules, respectively. On the right, we have complex carbs, oligosaccharides and polysaccharides. Oligosaccharides are combinations of a few monosaccharides, but they're not particularly important from a consumer perspective, so we won't really talk much more about them. Polysaccharides, on the other hand, are a combination of many glucose molecules, well, typically glucose molecules, but many monosaccharides. All carbohydrates are made of 3 elements: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And how these elements are combined and how the structure is made is what makes all the difference in how we process these different types of carbohydrates. All right, let's start with monosaccharides. Monosaccharides are the building blocks of carbohydrates. So let's look at these chemical structures just a little bit. I should mention that glucose, fructose, and galactose are really the only nutritionally important monosaccharides they're the basic monosaccharides. There are a couple others. For example, ribose is part of deoxyribonucleic acid, which you may also know as DNA. And yes, it is a monosaccharide. But nutritionally, these are the important ones, and we'll talk about them now. Okay, so the C's in these chemical structures represent carbon, the H's represent hydrogen, and the O's represent oxygen. Your book notes that glucose is the preferred carbon source for organisms from bacteria to plants to animals. And glucose is really incredibly important to your body. Glucose fuels your brain, your muscles, and your organs, and it's a special molecule. Your body is set up to process it preferentially and efficiently. We often compare other monosaccharides to glucose. Galactose here differs from glucose because this OH on carbon 4 is flipped. So see how it's on the top here in galactose, and then in glucose, the OH is on the bottom. It may not seem like a very big difference, but it allows galactose to form lactose, which we'll talk about when we talk about disaccharides. All right, then you also may see that fructose over here is a pentagon, or a pentose, meaning a 5-ring sugar, instead of a 6-ring sugar, or a hexose, like glucose and galactose. This allows fructose to be metabolized differently, which is important when you think about high fructose corn syrup and other sweeteners that are high in fructose. And you'll hear about that a little bit more in the Freakonomics podcast. Another thing to know is that artificial sweeteners usually fall into the category of monosaccharides, though sometimes they are disaccharides like sucralose, but they are variants of these molecules that still hit the sweet receptors on your tongue, but they're different enough that our bodies can't process them, so they don't add calories. So that's how you get your diet soda. All right, disaccharides are 2 monosaccharides combined. Sucrose is a combination of glucose and fructose, and it's your basic table sugar. Maltose is 2 glucose molecules that are bound together. Note that both sucrose and maltose have the same bond in between them, and this is called an alpha bond. Lactose is found in dairy products, and it's a galactose molecule bound to a glucose molecule. Notice how right here, this bond is different than the alpha bond in maltose and sucrose. This is called a beta bond. Many adults, especially those that don't have like a Northern European heritage, don't have an enzyme necessary to break apart this beta bond, and this leads to lactose intolerance. All right, polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are long chains of molecules, and usually they're made up of glucose. Plants and animals use polysaccharides to store glucose for when they need it. Glycogen is how animals, including us, store glucose. It has lots of different branches which allow the glucose molecules to be chopped up really quickly when they're needed. We store glycogen in our liver and skeletal muscles. Excuse me. Amylopectin and amylose are plant storage forms of glucose, and we can digest them. Cellulose, which is not pictured here, but it's another glucose polymer, is a structural polysaccharide, and it's used by plants as the main structural component. And we can't digest cellulose, but that's not a bad thing because it's one of the main components of fiber, which has a whole host of health benefits. All right, those are the different types of carbohydrates. Watch the videos on carbohydrate digestion and insulin and glucagon. You may notice that in the PDF of the slides, there are 2 extra slides about digestion and insulin and glucagon. Those are because those are the main points that I want you to take away from the videos, and also maybe the things that show up on a test. Just a little hint there. All right, enjoy the videos and the podcast, and I'll see you in the discussion.